Yes, you can take your seats, and as you do, can you just greet someone next to you and just say hello? Just tell them you love them. Tell them that you're grateful that they're here. All right. Just a little quick reminder, after Sunday and after closing, what we're going to be doing is these things called Seek First Sundays. We're going to be spending the entire month of January seeking first the presence of God and His kingdom. And what that means is we're just going to, after we clear out, after closing worship, we're just going to gather here again and just have a dedicated time to pray and pray for you as well. And so if you guys want to stick around for that, you're more than welcome. We'd love to have you and bless you in that. All right. Can we get my slides up? The tension pressure of a rock can vary from 18 to 66 megapascals of force, meaning it takes 18 to 66, depending on the rock, megapascals, which is about 145 pounds of pressure per square inch on a rock in order to break it, depending on the rock. However, in order to crush a rock, it requires almost 3 times the amount of pressure to do so. All that to say, in the passage that we're going to be looking at today, Josiah, what he did was he didn't just break the rock of the altar or the high place, but what he did was he went to the extent of crushing the altars, the rocks that were used to worship Asherah specifically, into powder. All that to say, it takes 3 times as much work and pressure and hard work to destroy the idols that we make in our lives, ultimately saying it's easier to make an idol than it is to break an idol. Today, Tabitha and I, we're going to be working hard on both ends. So we're going to be she's working with your children to prevent the making of idols. And here we're going to be working on the latter end and working on breaking some of the idols in our lives. Amen? All right, so the passage today is, as you guys know, out of 2 Chronicles chapter 34. And it says this: in the 12th year, he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem of high places, Asherah poles and idols. Under his direction, the altars of Baal were torn down. He cut to pieces the incense altars that were above them and smashed the Asherah poles and the idols. Those he broke to pieces and scattered over the graves of those who had sacrificed to them. He burned the bones of the priests on their altars, and so he purged Judah and Jerusalem. In the towns of Manasseh, Ephraim, and Simeon, as far as Naphtali, and in the ruins around them, he tore down the altars and the Asherah poles and crushed the idols to powder and cut to pieces all the incense altars throughout Israel. Then he went back to Jerusalem. All right, today we're going to be talking about idols. Last week we talked about seeking first the king and his kingdom, and that in order for us to start right, we need to start by seeking first. The first work decision that Josiah makes after this, after his seeking, is to basically take these idols and crush them into powder. And so we have to ask ourselves the first question: what is an idol? Because I don't think that's as obvious as we think it is. Tim Keller's definition: an idol is anything more important to you than God. Anything that absorbs your heart and imagination more than God. Anything you seek to give you what only God can give. Anything that is so central and essential to your life that should you lose it, your life would feel hardly worth living. An idol is when anything from a great to good thing or bad to ugly thing becomes an ultimate thing. And idols occupy this space in our heart, this quiet, untouched space where we look at something or anything and we say to ourselves, if I could just have that, if I could just have this, then I'd be okay. Then my life would have meaning. Then I would be safe and secure. Then I would have everything that I want. Whatever it is, this is just a couple general pictures. But whatever it is, anything that occupies that space where we say to ourselves, if I could just have this, that is idolatry. So let's just do a little exercise with me, okay? Let's take ourselves and our lives, and let's look back, I guess depending on how old you are, let's look back 10 years. And then let's look back 20 years. Let's look back 30 years. If you look back at those stages of your life, I'm sure at some point you said to yourself, if I could just have this one thing, everything would be worth it. When you were a teenager, I'm sure you said to yourself, if I could just have the love of that one boy or girl, my life would be worthwhile. When you were in college, you said to yourself, if I could just pass this exam with flying colors, everything would be meaningful. But now look back at those things. How meaningful, how special, how all-encompassing were those things that we spend so much time, energy, and love pouring ourselves into. I remember in college, every single exam I took, I told myself, this is going to make or break my life. And I kid you not, I can't even tell you one of those exams or one of the points that I even went over. This, my friends, is idolatry at its finest. Whatever occupied that space after that sentence, if I could just have this, that, my friends, is idolatry. It's quiet. It's untouched. Not many people realize that that is actually idolatry. So we need to look at, does anyone know this reference by any chance? I know this is old. Mel Brooks, The History of the World. I feel like it's so important for me to dedicate this one. This guy gets up on the stage and he says, I have these 15, and then he breaks one and he says, the 10 Commandments. No one, oh my gosh. Yeah. Mel Brooks, History of the World. Josiah, he starts his reformation, and the first decision that he makes is in his dealing with the high places. And the Bible talks about high places a lot. And I don't think many of us have an understanding of the significance of a high place. High places were essentially artificially elevated places of worship. The Israelites back then, they believed that higher places were closer to God. It's kind of a common theme. In other words, these were altars. And the first high place was actually traced back to Genesis 12, when Abraham, he follows God, and in that place of Bethel, he builds an altar for God and says, this is the house of God. And so ultimately, the high places were used for worship for the true God, the true Yahweh. Eventually, over time, those high places started becoming a little bit misconstrued for other gods. And so rather than just worshiping the one God, they started worshiping other gods on those places. So why start with idols? Why is it so important? Think about the timing of Josiah's decision making. Why did he start with idols? He could have done anything else, but he started with idols. And there's some practical reasons, right? There's some practical reasons like you need to clean house in order for the new house to come in. You need to have a fresh start, so that's why he probably cleaned house. It was probably a very practical decision. But I think it's actually deeper than that. If you think about it, in his time of seeking, in his 4 years that he spent seeking after God, I'm sure he heard one sentence more than the rest. And keep in mind, at this moment in history, in Josiah's journey, he doesn't have the Bible yet, or their version of the Bible. They don't have the book of the law yet. And history during this time was passed down orally. So they spoke the stories, they spoke the words from previous generations, and it was passed down. And and historians say that actually you would imagine and think that this is not accurate, but this is actually wildly accurate. There's a lot of proof to show that the oral history being passed down was accurate. It wasn't just wrong. It wasn't like our game of telephone. And so I'm sure in Josiah's seeking, in his tutelage, in his learning of the ways of God, he heard one sentence more than the rest. And that sentence is the sentence that Mark read today. You shall have no other gods before me. And the second commandment is that you shall not make an image of another god. I'm sure he heard the stories of Moses and heard the stories of the tablets, and the first thing on the top of the list, oftentimes being the most important, he looks at that and says, you shall have no other gods before me. And Josiah just meditating on that one word. And guys, that is enough Bible for you to meditate on and for that to change the rest of your life. We think we need to have just more content, more preaching, more teaching. The American church is oversaturated with content and teaching and preaching. If you can just hold on to this one command, this one sentence in the Bible, that is enough to change the course of your life and the generations after you. That's God's promise. Amen. Yes? No? Maybe so? So if you want to start this year off right, we have to start, when it comes to an actual decision, at this place of idolatry, at this place of the commands. You shall have no other gods before me. So let's take a look at the 10 Commandments real quick, because this is an important part of the flow of this message and just everything here on after this. For hundreds of years, right? For hundreds of years, the Israelites, they were captured and taken into captivity by the nation of Egypt. And I'm sure many of you guys know the story. I don't want to assume, but Moses, he says, let my people go. And there's a whole movie about it in Disney. If you want to watch that, by all means, go watch it. It's a great movie. And so for hundreds of years, they're held in captivity. All they know is slavery. And right around the time that God wants it, he calls Moses to set his people free. And they do that. There's some wild displays of God's power. The frogs and the locusts and all that stuff, the plagues and everything. And so ultimately God sets them free, puts them into the desert and says, now start walking to the promised land. 3 months after they were set free from captivity, this is the scene that happens. Not this actual one. He got 2 tablets. Don't get me wrong, this is not biblical. But he got 2 tablets with the 10 Commandments on it. So think about the timing of that. Think about that for a second. Why would God, in his sovereignty, give the commandments after he sets the Israelites free? Oftentimes in our understanding, we think in order for me to be set free, I need to listen to the laws and the rules right now, and then I will be set free. But here, he doesn't give the commandments while they're in captivity. He gives them the commandments after they were set free. So what does that mean? That means ultimately God's laws and his rules, the 10 Commandments, were not made to control the people of Israel, but they were made to keep them free. They were not given for them to be enslaved again. That would be undoing what God had already done, would it not? It was meant to keep them free, to maintain their freedom. And God gives them the 10 Commandments and says, I'm giving you these things so that you will never be caught in bondage again. I'm giving you these things so that you can maintain your freedom all the days of your life, that you would know that I am your God and you are my people, and that you'll never have to walk into slavery ever again. God's commands are all about freedom. They're all about freedom. They're not about control. However, I've heard it said oftentimes that Christianity feels a little too restricting. I knew a girl who did not want to become Christian because she was weeping in front of me saying, do I have to dress differently now? And I'm just like, yeah, I don't think it's in my place to tell you how to dress, but that's not God's priority here. We've heard it said that Christianity oftentimes can be too restricting. I feel like I have to give up too much. Well, my friends, that's a mistake on our understanding of freedom. Our understanding of freedom is not the absence of rules. But freedom is not the absence of limitations and constraints, but it's finding the right ones, those that fit our nature and that liberate us. What does this mean? This means that every single person in this room, whether you live in the prison or in the palace, we all have to abide by a certain set of rules. No one is exempt. Not the billionaire or the millionaire. No one is exempt from living by a certain set of rules. And so idols, what they do, idols dictate the rules of the game that you play. Whatever you worship, whatever has your love, your attention, and affection, that, my friends, is the rules of the game that you're playing. So let's follow along with me, all right? For example, if we idolize our children as parents, if we idolize our children, the rules we say to ourselves are, if I could just do this for them, then they will be okay. And parent guilt is kind of just a reflection of that. I'm sure if you're a parent in this room, we've all experienced some parent guilt. If I could just make sure that they don't watch TV, they'll be okay. If I could limit their television, they'll be going to Harvard. If I can make sure that they all eat organic, gluten-free, soy-free, whatever free, they will be okay and get into Harvard. I'm sure some of us, we've all said that to ourselves. If I could just do this for my child, they will be okay. My friends, that's idolatry. If we idolize money as consumers, the rule we say to ourselves is, if I could just have this, if I could just have this one thing, tangible or intangible, I'd be so much happier. I'd be so much safer. I'd be so much more secure than I am right now. If I could just build up my war chest, then I'll be free. If I could just have this. If we idolize religion, and yes, it is possible to idolize religion. As Christians, the rule we say to ourselves is this: if I could just be this, if I could just be that kind of a person, if I can make myself into this kind of a person, then God will be happy with me, and He'll be pleased, and I'll be okay. Whether we idolize our families, our money, our religion, if you've ever said this to yourself, if I could just do this, have this, or be this, that's the quiet place where idolatry starts to begin. We don't think of it that way. We think, oh, this is just the way the world is. My friends, that's the game you're playing. That's the game we're playing. We all have an idol, and we all are subjects to it. And when an idol becomes the object of our attention and our affection, we become the subjects of that idol, to its rules and constraints. So, if children are your idols, then you have to do this. You have to feed them gluten-free, soy-free, and organic in order for them to do well in life. You have to do these X, Y, and Z in order for them to make it. If money is your idol, you have to have this in order for your life to have meaning. You have to have a war chest in order for you to be secure. If religion is your idol, then you need to become that kind of a person in order for God to be pleased with you and for God to love you. The reality of the rules of whatever it is that you worship, the rules of the game, is that they never change. The rules of the game will never change. If you're playing the game of money, family, or religion, the rules will never change. The only thing that could change is what you worship, what you love. The rules of the idols won't change, but the idol can. And that's the thing. We can only change what we worship. We can only change what we love. We can only change what we look up to. On a side point, you may not know it, cognitively, but experientially, there's a chance that if you are constantly feeling this pressure to perform, whether it's with your family or in the work or with yourself, if you feel like the pressure to perform, most likely that's just a symptom of idolatry, because idols will always make you perform. They'll always make you work for it. You'll have to earn it. All right? So, Jesus, okay? Jesus had a particular set of rules. He had rules. Why? Because the one he worshiped, the one who had his attention and affection, was God the Father. And so even Jesus, in his divinity and his godlikeness, he submitted himself, he subjugated himself to a particular set of rules. And those rules were seen here. On the night he was about to be, the night before he was about to be murdered, he goes to God, he goes on top of Mount Gethsemane, and he prays this prayer: "My Father, if this cup cannot be taken away unless I drink it, your will be done. What's he saying? He's saying ultimately, God, if you can, take this responsibility, this burden of saviorship off of me. He's basically saying, God, this seems like it's kind of a lot. It's kind of scary. It's a big deal. And if there's any way around this, then Lord, please, let's use that option. But what does he say at the end? Your will be done. Because Jesus was a subject of God's kingdom and God's rules, he said, this is what I want. This is what I desire. But since I'm a subject of your rules, and since you're the one that has my attention and affection, I'm playing by your game. You require a sacrifice, Jesus, I will be that sacrifice. You require me to lay down my life, God, I will lay down my life. Jesus played by a set of rules. And for me, I've noticed that anytime I have any resistance when I find resistance to God's commands, for me personally, I realize it's oftentimes not the size of the task or the command, but it's the lack of my attention. It's the lack of my affection to him. So Jesus, his rules, the law of his life, revealed who he worshiped. It revealed who he loved and who had his affection. It showed us what he loved more than anything else. And I'm going to close with this, so Pace, you guys can come up. Your rules reveal your idols. Your rules reveal your idols. And so this past week, just to be as practical and try to live out what I teach, I mistakenly asked my wife, just out of the blue, I asked her, what are some of the rules you think that I live by? Because oftentimes you can't see your own mess and your own idolatry, so you kind of need to ask someone who knows you, right? So I asked her just out of the blue, what are some of the rules you think I live by? And she said very quickly, to look good. To look good. Yeah, why is that so funny? To look good. And I'm like, no, I need something comical. At this point in the message, kind of need to lighten things up and need something funny. And she just looks at me, she goes, that is funny. She goes, that's hilarious. And I'm just glaring off into space, thinking to myself, so you thinking of me thinking about looking good is a joke to you. I had this existential crisis of a moment right there. I regretted asking that question, but she explained, she's like, because we've been trying to vamp up our YouTube, and this is kind of a shameless plug. I'm posting up supplemental videos for each message on YouTube. There's a lot of stuff that I have to leave out of the message because it just doesn't flow with the entirety of it. So if you want like the practical supplemental stuff, it's like a 5 to 10 minute video in the middle of the week that you can watch just to help you guys guide you through this stuff. And this week's obviously all about idolatry. And so when you go on YouTube and you see like 100 videos of yourself and you see like your body transformation and you realize that the camera does add like 62 pounds on you, you kind of think to yourself, man, I gotta change something up. And she was like, my wife just looked at me and she was like, this is hilarious, Dave. Look at your office, look at your space. There's no Bibles, there's no anything here. There's weights, there's dumbbells. There's cleared space so that you can start doing push-ups and start working out. This is hilarious. And I realized, that's right. Me looking good, or just looking 62 pounds less on the camera, became an idol in such a way that it dictated what I ate and how I ate throughout the week. It dictated where I went. It shaped my exercise schedule. So I would have to prioritize, right? I put it in my schedule. I'm going to work out from this time to this time. Oh yeah, I got to do devotionals. It became the priority. It became the thing that I had my attention and my affection towards. That was my idol. So what did I have to do? Because looking good became an idol, I had to live by its rules. I had to not eat certain things. I had to not do certain things. I had to not go to certain places. Why? Because I was living by its rules. And don't get me wrong, any one of these things in and of itself are not bad. Are not bad. Money, religion, family, they're not evil. They're not bad. And so the first thing you should not do after this is deny your children and tell them that you don't care for them and that you have to prioritize God, so go feed yourselves. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying destroy everything around you. What I'm saying is, when it comes to the loves of the heart, what has your attention and your affection, the thing that you love the most, the rules that you play by are kingdom rules. Jesus had a set of rules. And his was, seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and everything will be given unto you. All these things that you're longing for and hoping for, it'll be given unto you. That was his rules. The greatest command, Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. Those were his rules. Jesus' rules were made to set us free, and they were made to maintain our freedom. All the other rules of life, they'll bind you into slavery. But Jesus's will set you free. Today, I am praying that you'll walk into a level of freedom that you've never walked before. Not because you found a new set of rules, but because you started worshiping the one who can actually provide that freedom and give it to you all the days of your life. Let's pray.